Hello, all, and welcome back to another episode of Movies in Us, a weekly gathering place filled with conversations about movies, stories, and connection. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
And today we're going to be reviewing the latest film, Challengers. Sarah, kick us off with an IMDb summary for Challengers.
Tashi, a former tennis prodigy turned coach, turned her husband into a champion. But to overcome a losing streak, he needs to face his ex-best friend and Tashi's ex-boyfriend.
Nothing can go wrong with the setup.
No. Yeah, everything's going to be chill and calm. There's going to be no conflict.
We're just going to hold hands and kumbaya together.
Absolutely. Smooth sailing.
Two best friends and a girl that they're both in love with. Surely nothing can go wrong. Okay, let's start off with our one-sentence summaries for Challenger. Sarah, what is yours?
Mine is, sometimes you just need a hug.
Yes. Even if it's the form of a giant man barreling at you from midair.
Yeah, that counts.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. My one-sentence summary is Zendaya really is that girl.
Yep, she sure is.
This movie proves it. Okay, let's dive into our high-level thoughts about Challengers. In this section, we will not spoil this movie, and so we will just share our thoughts, our feelings, our review of this film at a high level. Sarah, I am intrigued to hear how Challengers worked or did not work for you.
Jen, I'm also very intrigued about this.
Okay, tell me more.
So, okay, this I saw this yesterday, and since seeing this yesterday, I've been obviously knowing that we're going to record this episode, and I'm like, I don't know how to talk about this movie. And so we see that I have prepared very well because I still don't know how to talk about this movie.
Wow.
It's very well made, and it is immersive, it is effective, great performances by the leads, like really cool cinematography, like very interesting direction, like all of the technical pieces are so solid and so interesting. And I feel very neutral about this film. And
that doesn't ever happen frequently, right? Where you're squarely in the middle.
So I'm not sure what to do with this movie because it is very good, and so it's not even like, oh, I didn't enjoy. Like I was immersed in it. I was like, yeah, we're on this journey. Like I think a lot of the things in it are very effective. So yeah, I'm not sure why I feel neutral about it because it's so good. And so that's where I'm at.
But it's interesting,
I don't know
because
what to do with this movie.
Your feelings of neutrality about how you relate to this movie are not because there's like great things and not so great things that then kind of cancel each other out, and you're like somewhere in the middle where you're like, these were great, these were not so great, so we land somewhere in the middle. You're just kind of like, awesome, cool, I guess, I suppose, while still appreciating some of those filmmaking components that seem to stand out to you the most.
Yeah, it's one of those where like I was engaged, I was interested in the theater, but I don't think that I'm going to think about this movie again. And I think that that's really interesting. Yeah, like even walking out of the theater, I was like, oh, that's a cool experience, but like I'm done. Like
were you entertained over the course of the 2 hours and 8 minutes, 11 minutes?
Yeah, it was entertaining, it was engaging. Like I wasn't like disconnected from it.
Oh, okay.
But then I was like, okay, I'm done. So I feel weirdly neutral about this. I still haven't rated this on Letterboxd because I don't know what to give it. So I think this is going to be a weird conversation because I'm not sure what I will be able to add to it. So this is going to be a fun ride.
Okay, my next question for you is there a movie that comes to mind where you felt similarly in any way? And maybe a movie doesn't come to mind immediately because, you've probably seen a million movies in your lifetime, but is there any other movie that you felt a similar experience to this one, where you're like, that was fun, but I probably won't think about it too much afterwards. And it's a little bit forgettable, but that doesn't mean the experience was not good.
I mean, probably. I Nothing comes to
Nothing comes
mind,
to mind immediately.
but
Okay.
I'm sure that it's happened before because I know that I've come to these recordings multiple times and been like, Jen, I don't know how I felt about a movie. So I would
Mm-hmm.
imagine probably one of those previous times is similar to this.
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
yeah, it's weird.
Fascinating. Um, it sounds like of the things that the movie presented and showed you for the 2 hours and 11 minutes, that the filmmaking and the cinematography and some of those technical aspects were particularly noteworthy for you. How did you feel about the storyline?
It was it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
It's a love triangle with some tennis. That is what was promised, and that is what it delivered. So that's what we got. I don't know. I
So
think it was
matter of fact, but
effective.
I love it. This is, yeah, I hear it in your voice. You're just like, yeah, it was a thing. It happened. These were the
Yeah.
components. Great.
I am so sorry for my part in this conversation
No,
for the next
I
50 minutes.
no, I love it because it is so fascinating for me. So you are seeing me jump into, like, I want to probe and understand more and dig into all of the aspects of it. So um that's why I have so many questions of curiosity. Because usually you are a opinionated movie watcher. Like, you'll come and be like, "Yep, this was really great," or like, "Did not work for me at all," or "Hey, some of these aspects did, these did not." Very clear stances. So it's always fun for me when there's a little surprise anomaly. I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay, my thoughts about this movie are decidedly negative. I did not really
Ooh,
find this very fun and engaging. That being
okay.
said, I can see why this would be a really fun movie going experience, and entertaining for plenty of people. I think the star power in this movie is really exciting. I think the performances like made this movie work as well as it did for what it did. Um, I think the casting choices I was thinking a lot about, just like perfectly cast uh, actors in the roles and the dynamics of the roles that they're playing. So I felt like that worked really well for this film, both like how they look visually, how they present themselves, types of roles that they've done in the past. Like, I think all of that is working really well for this movie. Um, I've just been thinking about the fact that this type of like fizzy pop movie is getting made and funded and out in theaters and seems to be doing like decently well at the box office. So that's really fun to think about for like the future of the types of movies that we get. Um, because this is like a standalone original concept, with fresh ideas. It's not tied to any universe of any kind. It very much is like a fun summer fizzy movie. And if it can get people into the theaters, like, that's exciting for movies. This is the type of movie that I would have expected to go like to Netflix. You see it on streaming. It's on the like top 10 list for like a few weeks, and then it's out of there and no one ever watches it again. But there seems to be a little bit more energy around this movie, so that's really cool. I think Zendaya is obviously like so charismatic and fabulous. I love seeing her in new roles and what she brings to those very different types of roles. Some that are more like serious and intense, and she's doing her serious acting stuff, but she's also just like such a celebrity and such a star that she can do a role like this, and you're on board and engaged. I think I was bored for a lot of this movie, which might be a me thing. Like, this just maybe is not the movie for me. But this movie's plotline reminds me a lot of some of the really pop um, fiction that gets really popular in like the book world, and specifically with Gen Z. I've read like a couple of them just out of curiosity for like what is the big new book that people are getting really excited about and talking about. And a lot of it is this like really intense, visceral storylines, super dramatic, but like when you really dig into it, there's really not that much there. So I feel like this falls into that category. Like, it's fun, it's a fun storyline, entertaining enough, but like there isn't there isn't a lot more. And the other thing that I was thinking about, which would be neat to talk about, is just Luca Guadagnino, the director of this film. One of his previous films, Call Me by Your Name, is such a like indie darling, super super moody, and there's so much ambiance to that film. There's so much to think about. It is so artistically made, and so his choice to go from that to this is just really fun to think about as well. So those are like the couple of thread lines that were running through my brain, and during this movie experience, and then afterwards, as I've thought about it a little bit more.
So this is going to be a very interesting conversation.
Yep. Yes, indeed.
Excellent.
Okay. All right. So why don't we include a spoiler alert here so that we have full free reign to talk about any aspect of this film? So if you haven't seen Challengers yet, is it available out in theater? So we recommend checking out before continuing to listen to the rest of this episode. Okay, where do we begin? uh yeah, what's a like thought that was kind of most prominent as you were reflecting about your feelings about this movie afterwards, other than this it was fine, it was neutral, I'm not sure how I feel about it. Is there anything in particular that uh, really stood out to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, one thing that I do want to talk about, and I think this might be a component of my neutrality. I'm not sure, but I want to talk about the score and the music.
Yeah.
And I guess first, how did that work for you? Do you have thoughts and feelings about how the score was incorporated?
I do have thoughts and feelings. It's one of my note items for us to talk about.
Excellent.
I again, I might be the problem because I love the composers Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross and some of the work that they've done in other iconic films, The Social Network, Soul. Like I've loved the scores that they've created for those films. I did not love this one. I am typically one that like when the score is working well, I actually don't notice it as much because it is so heavily integrated in with the rest of the film. So if I'm noticing the score, it's either because it's absolutely phenomenal or it's really distracting for me. And it in this film, it was quite distracting. I just I was not supposed to notice it in the moments that it would come in. Like some of the like heavy like electronic beats stuff as ways to transition between scenes, and then some of the like angelic children singing during the whole Tashi and Patrick car hookup scene. I was like, there's might be some meaning here that I'm not understanding, and that's why this is not working for me. But I found it really distracting, and it didn't work for me. How did you feel about it?
So my theory about this is that it's effective but overused.
Mm,
And because by the final third of the movie, I was laughing every time it came on. And I
yeah.
don't think that was the intended reaction. Um, and so I wish that the score had been used a little bit differently because I think
Mm,
it's very effective, especially that like techno, like pulsating,
yeah.
music. It's so effective in like getting you hyped and like getting you into that like angsty mindset where your mind is just going. And so I think that that is a very smart choice for this movie. And I think it's very effective for the characters and getting you into their minds. But man, I think it was just used way too much because I don't know, it almost seemed like a joke by the end. And I was like, oh, we're doing this. So I think a little bit more variation in the score could have helped that not feel so excessive by the end. But again, I might be the problem in this
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because I've read so many reviews where people are like, "Oh my gosh, the score was perfect, the score was amazing," and like you, I
Yeah.
love Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Hello, Mank soundtrack. I think I'm the only one who has obsessively
Mm.
listened to that soundtrack, but I love it. Um, so yeah, I think it's a very good score. For me, it was just overused.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a really great point around variation because I think they would use the same. Oh, it felt like the same clip of that techno beat again and again and again. You know what I mean? Like the same chords, the same progression. And it was like signaling, okay, we're transitioning to another scene now or another moment. It was using the same theme again and again and again. And I think that repetition just, I think it makes you notice it more because you're like, I've heard this before. Oh, it's back again. And oh, yes, it's back again. Which I think if they had done like a similar vibe, but different chord progressions or different ways that it enters and leaves for a scene, I think it would have worked a little bit better. I actually think that like it helps, especially in the first 20 minutes of this film, really contribute to that like buzzy, fizzy, summer, vibrant vibe that this movie generally has. And I think it works for what it does, and then it gets kind of we're getting hit over the head with it a little bit more. On a similar technical note, I felt that way about the cinematography. In the first, I think it's the opening shot where we get this like really smooth punch in that goes like past the crowds. It goes past the ref's shoulder and then into straight to the tennis match, and it's this really like stylized, flashy, vibrant type of cinematography. And I think in general the film is very creative and very fun with its cinematography, but there were some moments where I was like, this is a little bit too much for me, or it's not working with the scene, and it feels a little bit overdone, a little bit cheesy to me. So like some of the like slower motion shots of when like Tashi and Patrick like finally get together at night outside their car, or some of the like flashy camera like zooming back and forth within a tennis match to simulate like someone's head spinning back and forth. Like there were moments where I loved it, and I loved the audacity to like try this fun, new, creative way to film a tennis match. But then other moments I was like, this feels just a little bit like it's meant to entertain, and if that's the goal, then great. But it makes for a little bit of spectacle versus substance, which is generally how I feel at this movie. I think there's a lot of fun, fizzy spectacle stuff, but the substance just isn't there, so I'm a little less engaged.
Yeah, I think for me the cinematography worked for the most part. There are a couple things at the end in that last tennis match where I was like, no, you need to stop it and go sit down. And that was the
Which
like
moment?
POV shots of them
Yep.
playing tennis. I'm like, I don't want to see what it looks like to play tennis. I'm not a tennis player. This is not where I belong. And then the other one was where like the ball was the camera.
Yep.
Hated. Hated that so much. I get it. It's very creative. That's very fun. But I think to your point, those two creative choices for me felt uh, completely different than we had seen for the rest of the film. The rest of the movie
Mm-hmm.
is very, these like long zoom ins or these slow motion shots, or you're isolated and just focused on this one thing, or really creative blocking. Like all of these other things I feel like worked together as a cohesive whole. And then
Yep.
those two very stylistic, very creative choices just took me completely out of it. And I was like, wait a
Mm-hmm.
second, what are we watching? This is not even the same movie. But I think outside of those, I really did like a lot of the cinematography, and I really appreciate the creativity that we get to see in this. And I really liked the variation too, because there was a lot of different things that this movie does to keep you visually interested in what's going on. And I think that helped me to stay engaged in this movie. Just you never knew what the next scene was going to look like, or how it was going to be blocked, or like what is this creative thing that you're going to see that you haven't seen before in this movie, yet it still feels fluid. And I really appreciate that aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a visual feast happening in front of you. But it's there to entertain. I don't know if it's tied to like any particular meaning. It's like creative to be creative. You know what I mean? Which I think is where there's a little bit of a disconnect for me. Like there's some shots that are just like of the ball getting bounced, and then there's like um a shot from below at a very like sharp angle of like Zendaya's face, and you're like, cool, I've never seen Zendaya's face from that angle, but like now I have, and that's kind of neat. Like I just there's less, it feels less purposeful and intentional, which I think is more meaningful and exciting for me in a film when the cinematography is so aligned with the themes and the storyline and the mood. And this one's just like there to be fun. And I suppose like for some that's quite enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's one of the places that you and I will sometimes differ, is because I'm like, yeah, man, let's be creative. I love it. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
And I'm
definitely how
like,
I
what is
felt
this
in this.
for?
Yeah.
Like, why? Yeah. Yeah. I think that like this movie is like meant to entertain and very fun. I mean the premise itself of like two best friends who fall in love with the same girl, like it's gonna be a good time. It's gonna be dramatic. It's gonna be a good time. The thing that I think this movie could have pushed a little bit more to is there's a couple of scenes where like they crack a couple jokes, but on the whole, like there's not a lot of that. And I think some of the jokes that they did crack were like a little bit flat, a little bit mediocre. And I think that there's a version of this film that's a lot more fun and spicy and engaging and willing to lean into like, we're here to be a really good time. And I think I was looking for a little bit more of that as well. And I think had there been more of that, really fun dialogue, banter, engagement between these characters that are obviously like, in this really dramatic situation where you can play up a lot of that. I think I would have been willing to just be on board for like, this is just gonna be a fun experience and I don't need to look for anything else. I think we get a few little tastes of that with some of the conversations between Tashi and Patrick, especially when she's like dissing him. I think those were really great, really fun. And I think just had there been a little bit more pizzazz with the dialogue in the film as well, this could have been really fun for me. And I would have just been like, the cinematography doesn't need to have any purpose because I'm having a good time.
I think I enjoyed the dialogue maybe more than you did.
Mm,
I think particularly with Patrick's character, I found he is the worst.
literal worst.
He is such a cocky jerk. And yet, there is something about him that I really enjoyed spending time with, and he has that charisma that I was like, oh yeah, this is working for me. You're a fun time. You're a whole hot mess and a
Wow.
train wreck, but I'm having a fun time with you. And I think
Mm,
like Josh O'Connor gives such a
yeah.
good performance in this film, and so I think a lot of those moments when he was on screen, I was just having a good time because I was like, okay, what is he going to do next? He is just kind of this
Volatile.
loose cannon, and you
Yep.
don't know what he's going to do. And so I think it was almost this like, oh, what what's next? What is he going to do? I was almost having like an anthropological study, like I'm observing these people and I'm not in their world, and what are they going to do next? And so
Mm,
that was just, I think, a fun experience for me. I think any scene with Art and Tashi, I was like, oh,
yeah.
I am uninterested in this
Yeah.
because
So bored.
he was so boring.
Mhm.
Which I get, you have to have that for the love triangle to be complete, and how they're all wired so differently. But yeah, I had a good time with Patrick scenes, and then especially with Patrick and Tashi scenes. Those were pretty fun. I think that there were some moments where I would like chuckle to myself in the theater, but my theater was pretty packed, surprisingly, on
Mm,
a Saturday morning at 10 a.m. Shocked. Um, but I didn't hear like a lot of laughter from anybody else. So I think that
mhm.
that's also interesting. I would be like chuckling to myself at something and then be like, oh, wait,
I
was I
may
not
only
supposed to laugh
watch.
at that? So I maybe my whole theater was having a similar experience to you while watching at 10 a.m.
Yeah, the 10 a.m. crowd, man. They need their coffee, wake up a little bit, maybe get a few more chuckles out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I there were these moments where they're like setting up for a joke, and I'm like, all right, let's go, and then they just like deliver this flat line. I'm like, you. you could have done a little bit better. We could have workshopped that scene a little bit more. Um, but it sounds like, yeah, the Patrick and Tashi dynamic really stole the show for you. It's funny because I feel like Patrick is your Richie for me, for the bear. Go listen to our TV and
Mm-hmm.
Us episodes. We're reviewing the bear season 1 and 2. But yeah, I found him so infuriating, and I hate. I mean, he's more engaging on screen than Art is, but I found his character to be just like absolutely uh, difficult to swallow. He's just so volatile, such a loose cannon. It made for some really great moments between him and Tasha, and I think the foils between Patrick and Art, I think is so interesting, and the way that I think I mentioned earlier in my initial review, the casting choices to have Mike Feist as Art and Josh O'Connor as Patrick, I think are just perfect
Yeah.
visually, like the way that they look fit their roles. One being this like bad boy, loose cannon, really cocky, really confident, but probably not going to be too loyal. And the other one is just like this down to earth, good, faithful, but like maybe doesn't have that fire and ambition the same way that Patrick would. That just the foils of the casting choices I was particularly impressed with. And I don't know, I feel like casting's not something that is like the first to be captivating to me in a film. So for this one, that was honestly one of the predominant thoughts that I was having throughout this film. It's like, wow, they really did a fabulous job casting these actors in these specific roles.
Yeah, yeah, and they all have chemistry with each other, and they like play off of each other really well, or at least that's what I experienced, and was just kind of amazed at how well each of them is able to inhabit their spot in the group dynamic. Because I feel like if one of the three isn't strong, then this movie doesn't work. But all of them,
Mm-hmm.
even Art's character, uh, is so necessary for this to work. And so all of the casting, all of the performances are just so solid to make this as engaging as it is.
Yep. Yeah. And I think you bring up a really good point, which is that the combinations of all three of them together and then the pairs is significant, because if any of those pairs doesn't work and doesn't have that same chemistry, it kind of is the missing piece of the larger storyline. Like if, say, Patrick and Tashi don't have that chemistry, a lot of it physical, then the whole concept of her going off to have this little fling with him like doesn't make logical sense. But like within the storyline, like that is key in order for that moment to happen towards the end where she betrays, Art for this. And similarly, the the dynamic, them nailing the dynamic between Tashi and Art, and kind of honestly the power dynamic that they have between the two of them, and the way that Art is so willing to yield and listen to her, but he's so good and he's so faithful and caring. Like that dynamic is key. And so the balance of the chemistry and the flavors of the chemistry that they have in pairs together, I think, is really fascinating as well.
Okay, so I have a question. We know how
Okay.
you feel about Patrick. How did you feel about Art? What were your thoughts on that character?
Yeah, I went through a whole like arc of feelings about him, because I think in the beginning of the film he's honestly a shell of himself. So I'm like, I don't you seem to be a puppet for Tashi's ambition. So like, okay, fine. And I think it's in the flashback scenes where you see a lot of his more tender, more caring, gentler, really good, loyal sides to him. And then I'm like, all right, I get it. Like Art is that guy that you, as in your younger self, might have overlooked and kicked to the side. But no, like the fact that he has been so faithful, and Tashi is like recognizing that. I'm like, all right, this is great. But then by the end of the film, like he just again is continuing to be a shell of himself, and I think he doesn't know what he wants. He's kind of too doting, too willing to yield to her. He doesn't have a backbone. He doesn't know what he's looking for. He's really honestly lost, and I feel like that makes him a lot less compelling as a character. So I feel like in the flashbacks, I was team Art, And anytime we got to the present, I was like, okay, dude, like, what do you want? Like, you're kind of this blank canvas for anyone to paint on and tell you what to do. Just wanted more for him. And I think it's hard because for all of these years, he's been under the watchful eye and direction of Tashi, who is this like charismatic, fiery, ambitious, dominant personality. And so you can see how he's made himself smaller in order to yield to her in that way. So I went on a whole I went on a whole arc of how I felt with him. I landed net negative, but in the middle there, we were like, okay, like I could be on board for rooting for Art. How about you?
That's so interesting. I also did not trust him. I didn't trust
Mm.
Patrick. I didn't trust Art. I was on no one's team. Good thing this is tennis, and I didn't need to be on anybody's team. Um, I, I think for me, like you said, like Art is always under somebody else's direction. So
Yeah.
in the beginning, he was following Patrick, and Patrick was the dominant one. And then when they broke up, then he swooped in. He broke the bro code. Okay, that's also just not okay, but that's fine, whatever. And then Tashi is the one that's like really leading the relationship and pointing him in a direction. And the whole time I was just like, I still don't trust this dude. He's probably like, he's a much more stable partner, probably a good husband, probably a good dad. Totally get that. But because he is so easily like swayed
Yeah.
by other people, I was like, I can't trust that either. And so I was like,
Mm-hmm.
Tashi, can we just get you some into a good like therapist, start working on some things, because you using your husband like a doormat also isn't great. Can we
Yeah.
just get you to like a better place so that you're not, like toying with these two dudes that you've been
Mm-hmm.
toying with for like a decade or whatever? So I was, if I had to pick a team, I would be Team Tashi, but that is a
That's not
reluctant
the
team
choice,
to be
though.
joining,
Right.
because I can't be on the team of either dude because I don't trust either one of them. Though I think Patrick is far more entertaining. So yeah, I was just watching this movie and like, I you're all terrible, but I'm highly entertained watching you guys interact with each other. But
Yeah.
man, this is some toxic relationships going on.
And that is the definition of a lot of like popular fiction today that
Mm-hmm.
gets the
Yeah.
groundswell. Um, it's exactly what you said. It's people that are emotionally unhealthy, very toxic, and then you just let them collide with each other, and then drama happens, and it's very entertaining. They're page turners, but no one is growing, no one is emotionally healthy by the end. They're colliding with each other in all of the ways that they need help, and I feel like the ending of this film is the perfect the perfect example of that because Patrick's operating from his most toxic sides. Tashi is volatile, doesn't know what she wants, and is just like looking for affection in all of these different places and security in all these different places. And then Art is just like lost and trying to advocate for himself, but like also at kind of the beckoning call of his wife still, even when he's trying to assert that he wants to retire. So like no one has grown over the course of this experience. Has anyone grown?
No, but
Nope.
we got a wicked good tennis match at the end. And
We did.
so everything's fine. We don't need character growth, Jen. We just need good
Oh.
tennis.
Yeah,
I don't know. I
apparently
think I
shot
think
from the
that's the moral.
POV. Yeah. The moral of the story is hug your friends and don't let the opposite sex get in the way of your sweet friendship. That apparently, let's talk about the ending, shall we? While we're here. What did you think of the ending?
Okay, so honestly, I as as the movie was going, I was like, okay, we're nearing the end. How are they going to land this
Yeah.
plane? I don't know. And so then it's like, okay, she wants Art to win. And then as Patrick agrees to let Art win, but is he actually going to let Art win, or is he going to be a jerk and put himself above these other people who he used to maybe slash a little bit does care for. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that that was really interesting because I was like, if either of them wins, I don't know that that is going to feel like a satisfying ending. And so I really do appreciate the way that this ends. And I think for me, I read it as Patrick's ability to read people. You know, he
That is the
is,
triumph of
yeah,
this movie.
that is his special skill. You know, sure, he's a good player, but he can also read people because we know that Tashi doesn't seem to know what she wants. Like, she wants to win
Yeah.
big and she wants to be the tennis star, but that is not available to her anymore. And so she wants to make her husband the big tennis star, but he doesn't want that. So he's not doing that. And so she can't get what she wants, but she also doesn't know how to express what she wants. And so I read that ending as Patrick being able to go, wait, I know what you want. You want to watch a really good tennis game. So, tennis match, excuse me. You can tell that I don't play or watch tennis. Um, and so that's what he
Oh,
gave
I
her.
see.
He gave her
I
a really
see.
good tennis match. And that was just a nice thing to do. He's still the worst, but at least they had fun. He got to hug it out with his friend. She was entertained. We all win.
So this is actually the grand romantic gesture of
No.
Patrick. Yeah, but because from the
But it's,
very beginning, I think in their little like hotel room interaction, she said, I
mm-hmm.
like when she says like I'll give my number to whoever wins.
Yeah.
That's what she wants.
Yeah. Yeah. She
So
just
really,
wants
he's a
to be
romantic.
entertained.
Wow, amazing. He
I mean,
remembered it all
sure.
those years.
We can go with that. I'm fine with that. I like to view it as like he can just read people as opposed to like a I'm running through the airport for you romantic gesture, but that's fine. It can be a romantic gesture if we want to label it that.
I thought I saw it as like him sticking it to art.
Oh, that's
I
fair.
thought he
There's some of that
I thought
too.
he was gonna throw it. I thought he was still gonna throw it. Like he was still gonna double fault, but he's still gonna like he's gonna lose this match, but win the emotional relationship tournament of him basically being able to say like, yeah, well,
Mm-hmm.
I slept with your wife, so like you can have this match. Congratulations, but I am the ultimate toxic man. So alas, here's my triumph. Here's my trophy. What did you make of her cheering at the end?
She had a good time,
Yeah.
which is great. Like, I'm glad. I'm
The
glad that
moral
you
of the
had
story
fun.
is hug your friends and have fun. That's the thesis.
Yeah. Yeah. Play some good tennis, you know? End it with a hug. Why not? Isn't that how all tennis matches are
Oh
supposed to
my
end, is with a hug?
goodness. Right.
It seems right.
Specifically over the net. Like we're
Yes.
also doing track
Yeah.
and field and like this is now one of the hurdles. Yes.
Yes. You have to run up to the net and hurdle over the net to hug your friend. Yes.
Well, it's funny because I
Yeah,
think
that
in
feels right.
tennis you get like penalized for touching the net at all. So the I'm sure flying over it,
Mm.
uh, maybe you get like bonus 10,000 points if you can do that successfully.
Ooh. Yeah. Yeah, it's a reverse penalty, you know.
Yeah,
It's like
it's like the
like
secret
when you
menu at like McDonald's. You're like, you
exactly.
only the insiders know.
We have just discovered how you win at tennis. You're welcome, world. We got you.
But is the key to land in your best friend's arms? Is that the key? Like if you
I
just
feel like
fly over,
yes.
I feel like you've got to land. Yeah, that
Yeah.
seems essential.
It must end in a hug. It has to.
Yeah,
Because if
which
it
takes a
doesn't
lot of
end in a
planning.
hug, you're just flying over a net and looking foolish. But
Right.
if you end in a hug, then it's satisfying for all parties.
For all parties. Yeah.
Yes,
And then
including
you get
Zendaya.
some whoop and
Yes.
hollering like we saw from
Yeah.
Zendaya. Yeah, that's very good. And there's a little bit of tact involved. You got to lure your opponent or your best friend up to the net, with some shorter shots, bring them up close enough, get them right in position for your flying through air. Some pixie dust from Peter Pan. He got a
Mhm.
lot of height on that. That was very
He did.
impressive. He is
Honestly,
not a
though.
he's not a tall man. Like but he got the height. It was very good.
Well, and especially after sweating for like however many hours he's been playing tennis. I don't know how long tennis matches are, so whatever. But he
It
was
could be
out
like
there for
several
a
hours.
very long time. He's
Yeah.
probably very exhausted. And then to launch
Mhm.
himself like that into the hug, he deserves 10,000 bonus points.
Into the hug. Uh, it just doesn't make any sense. You just found out he slept with your wife. Like, are we just like, oh, is this the like, you know what? Let's just pretend nothing ever happened from the past 10 years. Like, let's just be best friends again. And this girl got between us. All is forgiven. Call it good? I so many questions I don't understand. Why was this the
Mhm.
choice for the ending? What does it mean?
So that she could have a good time. That's it. That's all that we cared about. Whatever. They can work it out.
All
We don't know what's going to happen with them. They might not
right.
ever speak again, but she had a really good time watching this tennis match.
She did. She did.
And that's what we care about. That's what
That's
she said that she wanted in the beginning of the movie. And it only took 2 hours
hours and
and
11
multiple
minutes.
years, but
Yeah.
she got what she wanted.
Oh, indeed. Indeed. Okay. What else should we talk about? I no, I don't know.
uh,
Well, one of the things that I wanted to talk about that I jotted down was uh lots of advertising happening in this movie. We've got so many. Uniqlo, Dunkin' Donuts, Coca-Cola. I think there was a couple more. Applebee's was in there. I was like, making a movie is really hard, really expensive. I'm glad we are finding the funding sources to make this happen, and we're being scrappy with it because it's hard to make a movie. So I was looking for those everywhere to entertain myself through this experience.
There are so many. And honestly, I love how they did it though, because you can also see the type of product placement in certain scenes reflects where the character is at in their lives and like monetarily where they're at, So
Mm-hmm.
like you see them drinking Gatorade when they're at Stanford
Yes.
with like the old logo, which I just loved. And then when they have more money, then they're drinking like AG1 and all of that kind of stuff because they have the money.
Yep.
And then even the like athletic wear changes throughout the film depending on where they are on the
Yep.
spectrum. And so there was so much product placement. It was a lot. But I liked how they did it because it is also part of the telling of the story of where these characters are at, what they can afford, what brands might be interested in them potentially. We don't always know if something was a brand deal or not. And so it was a lot. And I was like, yes, do what you got to do to fund your movie. But also, if you're going to do product placement, this is how you do it. You're not just throwing random stuff in here, just that doesn't make any sense. But this actually made sense and worked with the plot. I think with the exception of the Applebee's, that was just that felt out of left field for me. But
Which
I
yeah,
think the rest of it worked.
The Applebee scene was what at what point in time it was like a flashback early phase one though, right? I don't even
Yeah,
remember.
he
They were on a
was
date.
like doing tennis and like she wanted to like be on his coaching team or something. So like I don't think
That's
that
right.
they
It was
were
their
in
date. Yeah.
yeah, they weren't in college anymore, I don't think. So like I don't know. Applebee's felt like too on the cheap side for me for that, but I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I also don't know how much money you make playing tennis. We learned from this that even if you are a professional, it can still be difficult to make a living
Yeah.
because Patrick is in his woes. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe art was also on a budget
Roughing it.
then, and
Roughing
Applebee's
it.
was the best choice. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But also it's like just like such a fun indicative choice of like this is where he took her to, you know what I mean? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
down to earth and cheeky and like there's something that some people might find it endearing to go to like a fun chain store because it's the irony of it is kind of fun. So I don't know. It's just it's a interesting thing to think about for the character. Of all places, this is where art chose. Of course it would be where art would choose, you know? Like there's not
Mm-hmm.
no smooth
Yeah.
bone in his body when it
Yeah,
comes to
that's
girls.
true.
Yeah. All right. Any other Big thoughts. Oh, should we talk about the time cutting? How did that work for you?
Yeah, you know that I have some strong feelings about
I know.
flashbacks and how
Yeah.
they're used in films. And
Mhm.
I feel like a lot of times, not all the times, a lot of times that a flashback is used uh poorly when it's showing something that you could have just like written into the dialogue. Like you don't always need a flashback in a film. But
Mhm.
I think that flashbacks are used effectively in this because each time you flash back, you are learning more information about what's currently happening on the court. And I appreciated that aspect of this movie as well, is that what's happening on the court isn't an isolated incident, but each player is bringing all of their history and all of their experience to this match. And I like how that those flashbacks were cut in to kind of show us what these two are maybe feeling emotionally or mentally, or where they're at, and how that's messing with their current uh, the current task ahead of them in just playing this game. So I think for me it was effective. It got a little convoluted. I'm very thankful that Tashi had different lengths of hair
Yeah.
depending on where we were in time. Otherwise, I probably would have been completely lost. So it did get a little convoluted for me, but on the whole, I think it was mostly effective, and helping give us context that we couldn't have gotten another way.
Mhm. Yeah. I think it worked for this type of story. And I also feel like sometimes when you get frustrated with flashbacks, it's because it's cutting away from like a primary storyline, right? Like we're following the main line and we kind of make a little side trip to go back in time to get some detail that like we need to continue going forward. And in this case, I think the time cutting is so prevalent and so integrated into the entire storyline. There is no main storyline in this movie because we're constantly like collaging together all of these different snippets of information and backstory and backstabs and betrayals that make it significant for an interaction that happens in the quote unquote present. But I think for the most part, like the present isn't necessarily the most dominant storyline throughout this entire film. And so I think the frequency of how much we cut helps make this work a little bit better because it's now not necessarily a flashback even. It's just this story is nonlinear and we're going to tell it in a nonlinear way. So I think I was initially a little bit more irked by it. It ultimately, like seeing the whole picture now and seeing the whole story play out, it does make a lot of sense. And I think it makes for, if the goal is to entertain with this dramatic storyline, it does make it feel more dramatic because they'll be like, yeah, do you remember what happened in Atlanta? And then you're like, ooh, what happened in Atlanta? And then you cut to it. It aids to the like dramatic entertainment aspect of this movie.
Yeah, gotta tee those things up. Gotta get you
Yeah.
interested. Like, ooh, what happened? Tell us
What's
more.
the
Show us,
tea?
please.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do. We need the tea
Mm-hmm.
desperately.
Mm-hmm. And the film is like so unapologetically like explicit about teeing up the tea. You know what I mean? They'd be like, "Do you remember what happened in Atlanta?" Dramatic pause, and clearly we're like, "Tell me what happened." Like clearly
Mhm.
something went down between you two, and so I think that is again very much the mood and the approach that this film is taking. There's nothing subtle about it. It's just like you want a fun little storyline, we'll give you a fun little storyline. Come along for the adventure.
And we did. We came
And
along.
we did.
We saw all of the highs and lows of their relationships, and we
Yep,
saw a tennis bro hug.
we
It's
did.
great.
We did indeed.
Yeah. What more could you want in
Right?
a movie about tennis and a love triangle?
And a
We
love
got all of
triangle.
those things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Plenty of
Yep.
drama, plenty of spice. Got it.
Any other thoughts about challengers? Big things that you want to hit on.
I do have a question.
Okay.
What is your knowledge or general thoughts about tennis? And did that all influence your experience with this movie?
Yeah, it's not that much, I would say, because this is so stylized that there's less, you're just like disengaged with that part of your brain, which is great. I did find it like interesting to watch Zendaya play, and I was just curious. I don't know if she, I wasn't sure if she like learned how to play for this movie or she already played, but um there's some moments where her form is definitely not the like crisp like tennis player posture form, all that kind of stuff, but it kind of doesn't matter because she's so charismatic and uh just there's like a magnetic pull to her when she's on the court and she's like in that mode that you're like, well, I don't really care, you're really passionate and smashing the ball, like that's all I want to see anyway. um I was thinking about, what was the movie, it's King Richard, I think, was the
Yep.
yeah, yeah. The Serena Williams, Venus Williams, Richard, their coach, that whole tennis storyline. I think the way that they shoot a tennis match and the angles of the shot placement and all of that kind of stuff, I think did a better job. But this movie gets a lot of just, friggin' M's because it's not even trying to do that anyway. It's trying to be fun and stylized. So I feel like that was helpful because it's so dramatically in this different realm and not even looking to make this a like sports drama way of filming a tennis match, that you're like, okay, we're going to be the ball now and POV shot from there. And so that helps, I think, quite a bit.
Okay, that was what I was wondering because I know that you know more about tennis than I do because I know next to nothing. So the whole time I was going, like anytime anybody would be doing anything tennisy, I was like, I
Mm-hmm.
wonder if that's how that's supposed to work. Like when Zendaya was doing all of her stuff, and I'm like, is that how a tennis
Yeah.
player should look? I was like, I don't know
Um,
because I don't
yeah.
watch tennis.
Well, one interesting thing about tennis being the backdrop of this storyline that I thought was a smart choice is that every time when you see either Patrick or Art get really worked up and they're cursing and they get penalized for it, like I just think that the like very serious compressed nature of like the politeness and the protocol of a tennis match is the perfect pressure cooker for this really dramatic storyline about a love triangle. You know what I mean? Like, you are supposed to remain composed and you get deductions for your outbursts and your expletives and smashing the racket. And so when they do that and they're penalized for it, it feels bigger and more dramatic versus if, I don't know, if they're, at a hockey game. It's just a different dynamic. And so the fact that they are supposed to be more poised, I think makes for their outbursts feel really even more big and fun and dramatic. So I think that aspect is really cool about this choice of, because they could have set this love triangle against any other type of sport, and the choice to for it to be in the world of tennis is kind of a very smart choice. I'll give it to them for that one.
So you don't think that like pickleball challengers would be as entertaining?
The people in the crowd, different dynamic,
Different
different
vibe,
different
different
vibes.
vibe.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
no like ping pong challengers. That's not going to do it either.
Maybe some
All right.
fencing. I
They,
feel like fencing would be epic. Set this in like the ancient times. Yeah.
I
Get some
mean,
sword fighting.
I feel like haven't we had a trillion
We've
of
had
those?
plenty. Yeah, we have had plenty of those.
Okay. But I like it. I like that you brought fencing out of the sports bag of tricks because I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that I ever would have arrived at fencing. So it's good stuff. I like it.
The
Here for
ping
it.
pong version of this.
So good, right?
Oh,
Be
so good.
intense. It would be
Oh, very intense,
it
honestly.
would be harder to do the hug over the net situation. So we'd
Right,
have to
right.
like he would have to get some real air to get to that
Mm-hmm.
point.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But once
so
he's on the
wouldn't work.
table, it's easy to clear the net. He just got to get like crawl up. He's got to really just crawl up on there.
Or if he just like jumps it,
Oh,
jumps
yeah,
onto the
over the whole
table.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean, but then he'd basically have to be a superhero. So like that kind of puts a damper on things.
That is the one caveat that might be challenging. The
All
one
right. So
detail. The one,
so
because physics is a thing in this world. Yeah.
Yeah, challengers picked the right sport.
Really, though.
Yeah,
You think they started with that shot? They're like, we want to do this shot, and then we work backwards. Surely, I guess it must be tennis.
has to be. Has to.
We need a shot of a best friend flying over a thing to their best friend's arms. What
Hmm.
will best get us that?
Yeah, because like you can't do that with volleyball because the net
Nope.
is too high
Too
unless
high,
you are a superhero, which that's not
right?
this movie.
Nope.
Yeah. All right. Way to go,
This is very
challengers.
good. Yeah, they really thought through the logistics.
They did.
All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of Challengers. You can find it available out in theaters. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Movies and Us. Our name sums it up. We're all about movies and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about Challengers. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Movies and Us Pod, or email us at moviesanduspod@gmail.com. We will be back next week to discuss the film The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. That is a mouthful. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll see you again next week.